Welcome back to another week of box office. We have many things to talk about, so let's get into it. So up first, as always, we have & Juliet. Last week, 97%. This week, 95%. And 1,080,013 this week. And 935K last week. Cabaret the Kit Kat Club, last week, 95% and 1,063,245. This week, it had a lower capacity of 89%, but it went up to 1,114,514. Death Becomes Her continues to be a smash success. Last week, 99%, this week, 97%, and 1,261,688 last week. This week's 1,304,776. And I do wonder why Death Becomes Her's average ticket is only $112, because clearly there's a demand for this show, and so you would think that they would make the average ticket higher. I mean, it's still doing great numbers, but like I feel like they could have a 1,504,000. So it is an interesting thing. I mean, maybe they're just setting up their expectations and not wanting to outprice themselves and have a bad week, because it is a very expensive show to put on. There was an article that talks about how it costs like $1 million to put on every single week or something like that. So it is a very expensive show, and if they overprice themselves too much, they could get into big trouble very quickly. Gypsy, 96% to 84%, and 1,564,611 to 1,476,352. Hadestown had a big leap from 99% to 95%, and 706K to 855K. Hamilton, last week, 95%, and 1,532,751 to this week's 93%, and 1,921,803. Hell's Kitchen had one of its better weeks in a while, from 98% and 1,077,434 last week to this week's 89% and 1,148,333. Maybe Happy Ending continues to be a success, a smash hit at this point. Last week, 96%, this week 96.74%, and last week was 96.23 to be specific, and 851K to 887K. I mean, it's been doing 800K consistently for the past like month, 2 months, and it's high 800s, you know, it's not low 800s. So maybe Happy Ending is turned around and it's a smash, it's a success story now. And the only thing I will say on this, because I've gone over this musical at this point way too many times, is the idea that Darren Criss is a factor in the success of Maybe Happy Ending. Has made Maybe Happy Ending more accessible to the public. By accessible, I mean more people know about it, more people are aware that Maybe Happy Ending is there. You know, Darren Criss has his fan base from Glee, from Star Kid. He's obviously, you know, he won an Emmy, I think, he won an Emmy for the assassination of Gianni Versace, but he hasn't had a breakout hit part like Darren Criss or Hugh Jackman, you know? He hasn't made it big in the movie industry so far, and, you know, Glee was 10 years ago, and that hype has died down. And I will say that the Star Kid Glee fandom, I mean, some of them are at the age where they can start affording those higher ticket prices, but a lot of them, like me, are like 21, you know, and they're definitely not able to get the $300 seat for Maybe Happy Ending. So again, I think that his fan base is not able to show its full potential because they're not able to necessarily afford a ticket. And again, I think that if we look back at its preview performances, you know, it was doing very poor numbers. You know, obviously it was on purpose, because they were doing discount prices to get people in. But I mean, you know, it was not great. I mean, like it was doing 200K for, let's see, 4 weeks. where it did 200K. And played to very low capacity. And again, Darren is like, if Darren Criss wasn't in the show, it probably would have fallen to a 6 and done more 700K consistent, which would still be good. So Darren does add a little bit of a significance to it. But I think that maybe Happy Ending is not necessarily a stunt casted celebrity star helping a struggling show, because the show was struggling from the beginning. Darren Criss hasn't proven himself to be a box office attraction. He has in a sense, but not in the broader sense, if that makes sense. You know, he's not on the level of Daniel Radcliffe and Hugh Jackman. That is a stunt caster. That is a celebrity casting that brings in box office. Because even though the ticket prices for like maybe Happy Ending were like $47, you know, the capacity was only 78%. Like, that shows that there was a lack of interest. And I know Darren isn't super well known on social media, and maybe Happy Ending had to build up a word of mouth, and then it exploded. So I do think that this is a significant show because it gives hope for new musicals. And so I definitely do think that there is a bit of a caveat to Darren Criss being a part of the show. I mean, it got to, what was it, $700,000. Like, it had its first profitable week in December. So it was essentially, had a month and a half of, like, not being financially successful. And then since, you know, January and February, it's done fantastic, which is even more astounding than the 2 worst months for musicals financially, because there's no tourists and it's, you know, cold out. The fact that it's doing this the fact that it's doing this good and consistent numbers and dropping by less than 50K is, like, astounding. But that's just my take on it. Again, I think Darren helps, but he's, it very much was struggling the way, like, it was selling the way a show with a non-star in it was playing. Moulin Rouge continues to fail with 92% last week and 970K. This week, 95% and 1,096,166. Operation Mincemeat, which is a limited engagement, 100% capacity for only 1 performance and 111K. Not a lot to take there. And then we have Redwood with Idina Menzel, and it got panned by most critics except Jesse Green, who has the tastes of a monkey. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, the show has gotten bad word of mouth from audiences and from critics, but financially, it's doing pretty good. Last week, 98% and 856K, and this week 96.76% and 988K. So it's been very profitable in its very short time. It's selling capacity wise, you know, gross wise. Their average ticket is over $100. Their top ticket is $326. So I definitely do think you know, it's gonna have some more good weeks ahead of it. You know, it could do awesome in the summer, but when you know that if Idina leaves, the show's gonna go. And if I'm a producer, just close it in January with Idina. And I could even see it faltering and closing in the summer. Because of how many new musicals are coming in this season, and this is at the very beginning, and it appears that this is a very not good show. So again, we will see, but listen, I can give you almost 99% certainty that this show is not going to be here this time next year. And then we have 86% and 749K to this week's 86.92 and 826K. Sunset Boulevard had a pretty significant drop. Not a drop, but like it's doing its lowest numbers so far, with 91% last week and 1,306,183, and this week's 89% and 1,296,763. The Great Gatsby, like I predicted, is doing just as good as when Jeremy and Eva were there, 90% to 90% and 1,030,677 to 92% and 1,324,367. And then The Outsiders sold out, and played to 1,234,295 last week, and 1,548,537. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like, sub, comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.